Ever since the Amazon TV series of Fallout dropped, I've been dying to play a Fallout game again, but I've just never had the time due to Fallout games being one of those that once you start, you simply cannot stop. So realistically, I needed a good amount of time available to play it. I decided once I had the time to go for Fallout 4, it's probably my least played Fallout, and it's also one of those games that almost everyone has some sort of opinion on, with some people thinking it's the best Fallout ever made and others thinking it was a bit of a letdown. For me, I've always thought Fallout 3 with all the DLC included was the best game, so coming back to Fallout 4 years later, I honestly didn't know what to expect. But after spending around 50 hours replaying the main story and all its major DLC, I actually enjoyed it far more than I remembered. So let's go back to the Commonwealth and see if Fallout 4 still holds up in 2026. So the Fallout 4 story begins on the day the bombs fell. Unlike previous Fallout games where you're already a survivor, Fallout 4 actually lets you experience the opening moments of the nuclear apocalypse. You create your own character, spend a few minutes living a normal suburban life with your spouse and baby son Sean, before air raid sirens become blaring across Boston. You make it to Vault 111 just before the bombs hit, but instead of finding safety, you're cryogenically frozen. Years later, you wake briefly, helplessly watching your spouse being murdered while your infant son is kidnapped before you're frozen again. When you finally escape the vault, over 200 years have passed, your home is gone, the world has ended, and your only objective is to find your son Sean. It's actually a really strong opening and immediately gives your character a clear motivation, unlike Fallout 3. From there, the story slowly opens up into something much bigger. Instead of simply searching for your son, you become tangled in a political war between four major factions. The Brotherhood of Steel arrive with their enormous airship determined to eradicate synthetic life. The Railroad secretly rescue escaped Sims, believing they deserve freedom. The Minutemen want nothing more than to rebuild civilization and protect settlements. And finally, there's the Institute, probably the biggest mystery throughout the game. Hidden beneath the Commonwealth, rumours suggest they kidnap people, replace them with synth copies, and conduct disturbing experiments underground. For the first half of the game, you're constantly asking questions about them. Who are they? Why did they take your son? And can Sims actually be considered human? It's easily one of the strongest mysteries Bethesda has ever written. Unfortunately, I don't think the payoff quite reaches the same heights. Without spoiling too much, once the truth about Sean is revealed, I found the emotional impact surprisingly flat. It's an interesting twist, but one that never really landed for me. The faction choices, on the other hand, well, they're absolutely fantastic. Unlike some RPGs where your decision barely matters, Fallout 4 lets you completely reshape the ending depending on who you choose to support. With entire factions that can be wiped out, characters living or dying, the Commonwealth changing because of your decisions, it gives the game loads of replayability. Even after finishing it once, there's still plenty of reasons to return and experience the other endings. Ironically though, despite the main story being good, some of my favourite moments had absolutely nothing to do with it. Bethesda has always excelled at environmental storytelling. You'll discover abandoned vaults with horrifying experiments, research facilities where scientists slowly descended into madness, families who tried hiding from the bombs only to slowly starve together, and skeletons arranged in heartbreaking scenes. Tiny stories told through holotapes, notes and computer terminals. Sometimes I'd spend over an hour exploring a random building I'd never even been sent to by a quest, simply because I wanted to know what the hell had happened there. Those moments for me are why Fallout 4 and most Fallout games truly shine. So looking at the graphics, well, considering Fallout 4 is now over 10 years old, with it originally being released back in 2015, well, I actually think it still looks absolutely fantastic, especially when you remember just how enormous the world is. The Commonwealth feels genuinely believable. Destroyed highways, ruined skyscrapers, overgrown suburbs and abandoned military bases scattered throughout. Every area has its own identity. The lighting especially still holds up incredibly well, particularly during sunrise and sunset, where everything just gets covered in this beautiful orange glow. Weather effects also do a brilliant job of changing the atmosphere. One minute you're peacefully exploring, and then the next minute you're caught in a radioactive storm, desperately searching for shelter. For a game this size, it's genuinely impressive. Character models also still look pretty good as well, particularly facial animations, which are better than most that you see in modern day games. Overall, I'd say Fallout 4 has aged remarkably well visually. You can get a high textured mod pack for free, which is official from Bethesda, but for me, I tried it out, and with the size of the file, it's just not worth it. It doesn't add enough. You can look at some side-by-side comparison videos and you'll see that there's not a massive improvement there. Personally, I'd hold off on losing the gigabytes of storage and just stick to the base game, or installing one of the mods that someone else has made. Now, with it being on the older side now, this game, let's look at the performance, because a lot of games that I've gone back to now, which have been over 10 years old, I've struggled to get working on the system straight away. You normally have to download something to get it working. Well, it's kind of the same place here in that performance just isn't perfect. The biggest issue I had wasn't actually frame rates or crashes, it was loading times. Even with modern high-end hardware, loading between interiors taking anywhere between 2 and 5 minutes, which is absolutely ridiculous and painfully slow. Thankfully, there is a really simple community mod that uncaps the loading screen FPS, which is causing the issue. Once installed, my loading times dropped to roughly 10 to 11 seconds, which is perfectly acceptable. It's honestly one of the easiest mods I've ever installed, and I'd recommend it to absolutely anyone who plans on playing this on PC. Outside of that, the game ran perfectly well. Now, gameplay is where Fallout 4 made perhaps the biggest improvements over previous entries. The shooting feels considerably better than Fallout 3 or New Vegas. It's still not on the level of dedicated FPS games, but combat finally feels satisfying enough that you don't have to rely entirely on the VAT system. There's still a lot to be desired here, and I would argue that Starfield, that came out more recently, is the best shooting that Bethesda has ever made. It's still not perfect, but it would be interesting to see how Fallout 5 compares. Maybe we'll finally get that perfect shooting mechanic in a Fallout game. Now, I've mentioned VATS, and speaking of it, well, it's still brilliant. Being able to slow down combat, target specific body parts or weak spots is what separates Fallout from virtually every other open world shooter. Combat does become repetitive later on though. Eventually you're clearing another raider camp, another super mutant hideout, or another building full of ghouls. The enemy variety starts blending together after dozens of hours. Not a major issue, as there's still plenty of storytelling to find in these areas or buildings that makes it worthwhile, but it is something that does become a little bit tedious. And speaking of exploration, well, this is one thing that Bethesda constantly gets right. And it's definitely just the exploration, right? Because you can pick any direction in that game, just start walking and you'll always find something interesting. Whether that's a hidden bunker, a new vault to explore, military installations scattered around, or just random encounters, the game constantly rewards curiosity. I genuinely lost hours simply wandering off because something interesting caught my eye. Very few developers create worlds just as enjoyable as this to explore, and Bethesda constantly do that pretty damn well. I could have spent hours just watching a vertibird drop off a squad of knights from the Brotherhood of Steel and just seeing how they patrol and clear areas on the map. It's all done so incredibly well. I also really enjoyed the progression system. The perk chart is simple but incredibly addictive. Every level feels meaningful because you're always unlocking something useful. Could there have been a few more unique perks? Yeah, probably, but overall it's still a satisfying system. One thing I absolutely loved compared to the previous Fallout games was giving your character a fully voiced protagonist. I know this divided the fanbase somewhat, but personally I really enjoyed it, especially when you choose the sarcastic dialogue options. Some of those responses genuinely made me laugh, and having them voice deliver them certainly helps. I would say if you're not putting points into the charisma stat, then you're missing out on just some great alternative options in both combat and just normal speech. It makes scenarios play out completely different to normal. It's also slightly overpowered, as most hostile encounters where you have a max charisma means you can tend to avoid them. And again, speaking of combat, well, one of the biggest things in previous Fallout games was getting yourself a set of power armor, and in this game, well, it's had a massive redesign. Instead of feeling like normal armor, it behaves almost like a vehicle, which is pretty awesome until you realise it constantly needs fusion cores. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of that mechanic. In Fallout 3 I practically lived inside the power armor. Here I often avoided using it entirely because I didn't want to waste the fusion cores. Granted, it does mean power armor should be what it's meant to be, really powerful, but with fusion cores not being the most common thing to find and are often hidden behind doors that you need to lockpick or computer terminals that you need to hack, it can become a little frustrating not being able to utilise the armor. That being said, there is still a really good mod that lets you build a fusion core recharger, and you can recharge cores back to 100% after around 12 hours of game time. It's just a shame that this isn't an official thing that they've released. Weapons are also another mixed bag. Mechanically, well, they work well, but aesthetically I've never been a huge fan. I much preferred New Vegas's recognisable assault rifles and real-world inspired weapon designs. There's a few scattered around in Fallout 4, but most of the weapons just feel a little bit too homemade for my liking. Again, I get that this is what most of them are meant to be, but when I go to a military facility, it would be really cool to find a futuristic looking M4. Thankfully, again, the weapon modification system is absolutely excellent and lets you completely transform most guns. So much so that you can change a shotgun into an assault rifle and so much more. It's pretty damn wild. I think the biggest thing that was added and the newest feature that was added in this game compared to all the others was the settlement building. And honestly, it's pretty cool, especially if you're into base building. For me, it's one of those things that I occasionally enjoy before quickly wanting to get back out and explore. I appreciate its inclusion, but it never became the reason I played Fallout. In fact, my first playthrough, I spent so much time building the perfect base that it just burnt me out of the game. It took me ages for me to come back and finally finish the story off. I know a lot of people just spend hours and hours in this game just doing stuff like that, and that's great, and it gives you that other alternate reason why to play this game, but like I say, it can be a little bit distracting, and like I say, for me, it burnt me out of a complete playthrough. This time, I tinkered with it a little bit, but I kind of did the bare minimum just to pass me through the game. Now let's move on to the DLC, because there's quite a few that got released with this game. We'll start with Automatron, probably my least favourite story DLC. It adds the ability to build your own robots, which is genuinely cool, but the story itself never really grabbed me. It's definitely far too short. It's only a couple of hours worth of playtime. It's definitely worth playing once, but nothing more. I would like to have seen it add just a little bit more to it, and I've noticed that quite a lot of the times that you come across random encounters as well, it'll be replaced with these robots now, and you miss a few that do. And there's another DLC that does this, where it replaces random encounters with a specific enemy faction, and I don't really like that. I think it should be just like unique areas where they pop up, but yeah, it wasn't the best DLC for me. Moving on to Far Harbor, well, this is easily the standout expansion. The atmosphere is incredible, the fog-covered island feels completely different from the Commonwealth and just adds a completely different scenery. The moral choices are also fantastic, and the story is also very engaging and a decent length too. The map is large enough to just go fully exploring, and if you were only to buy one expansion for Fallout 4, well, buy this. It's brilliant. It's one of those that is definitely up there with what they've released. It reminds me a lot of what would be released in Fallout 3, to be honest, and it's a very, very good addition. You can tell that they took their time and effort to build this, where all the others felt just a little bit rushed, whereas this one feels like a proper story-driven DLC, which I really, really enjoyed. The last kind of major DLC that they released was the Nuka World. Again, it's another decent expansion. I actually quite liked becoming the leader of the raider gangs. It added something completely different to any other Fallout game. The biggest criticism people had was it was being forced into making morally questionable decisions. Personally, I thought it just made it a little bit more interesting. It gives you that different perspective and ability to roleplay this game. The problem that I had was that many of the park areas became fairly repetitive after a while, and the kind of story was also a little bit poor. There wasn't too much behind it. It was, go clear this area, once that's done, it's done. It's just very basic. Yeah, it didn't add too much. To be fair, the area itself was very big. It's, well, a decent size to explore. Not as big as Far Harbor, I would say, and definitely not as much content there. But there's enough to get by that you can have a little bit of a mooch about and find it semi-interesting. Like I say, it felt just a little bit flat, this one. What I would say is that the fact that they added this raider experience that you could take out into the Commonwealth and do something completely different was really good. But when I spoke about one where it replaced them random encounters, this is one. I went to an area where you normally find these two people arguing, one's a synth and one's not, and the synths come to replace the guy. that encounter just completely gone since playing this DLC. It was just replaced with a gang that was in this building, and that was just lost, which is a real shame because the synth one was really interesting choice that you had to make to find out if he was a synth or not. Whereas now it's just another raider gang that you just bump into and have to fight, which is, yeah, a real shame. Then we'll move on to the Vault Tech Workshop, which is very much aimed at settlement builders. If you love creating bases, you'll absolutely love this. Or if you love all the, I think they had that Vault game, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but when they released that, if you enjoyed that, you might enjoy this as well. You basically just become the overseer of your own vault that you get to build. If you don't enjoy base building, well, you're not going to enjoy this, and it's a pretty forgettable DLC, which is pretty unfortunate considering the whole premises around Fallout. One of the main things is the vaults. Yeah, it just felt, again, a little bit like an afterthought with this, and they just kind of went, we'll just give you the base building ability, and then we're just going to ignore the rest of it. Like I say, it's okay. If you enjoy base building, you're going to enjoy this. If not, just stay away from it. And then the last two DLCs are Contraptions and Wasteland Workshop. These are basically, again, just extra building packs. Nice bonuses, but certainly not DLC I'd recommend to anyone buying individually. Thankfully these days you don't need to. With the Game of the Year edition, or the Ultimate edition, what it's called, regularly drops below £10 and gives you everything. Honestly, then that's fine. But if you're going to buy the game separately to all the DLC, I'd just basically stay away from this unless you're really, really into base building. Most of these DLCs actually get some like really, really bad reviews, especially on Steam. I think almost all of them, apart from Far Harbor, sit at mostly negative, and it's purely down to the costs with most of them when the people have bought them separate to the game. Like I say, it drops below a tenner most times, so you can't really argue with that. But most of them don't add much apart from Far Harbor. So like I mentioned before, if you're going to get one, get Far Harbor. And speaking of community reception, well, when Fallout 4 launched back in 2015, it reviewed incredibly well with the critics, although RPG fans were slightly more divided, with most criticising the scaled down dialogue. Today it still holds a very positive review on Steam, and I think that's completely fair. Time has actually been kind to Fallout 4. It's also one of Bethesda's biggest modding communities ever created. Thousands upon thousands of mods completely transformed this game into something completely different. Although I will say Bethesda have occasionally released updates that unintentionally break large number of mods, which can become incredibly frustrating for players who rely on them. Personally, I mainly play most Bethesda games in the vanilla format. It's impossible not to appreciate just how longevity the modding community has given Fallout 4. So look, coming back to Fallout 4, well, it genuinely surprised me. I remember enjoying it when I first played it, but I just forgot how addictive this game is. One quest becomes 5, one building becomes an hour of exploration, one mission turns into an entire evening disappearing into the wasteland. After spending over 50 hours coming back and playing this, well honestly, I could easily see someone sinking around 500 hours or more into this game across multiple playthroughs. Even myself, in total I've spent around 200 hours in this game, and I could probably spend another at least 200 just playing about in it. The different faction endings, countless side quests and sheer amount of exploration give it incredible replay value. That said, I still don't think it's the best Fallout. For me, I still think it's Fallout 3, and maybe even New Vegas still edge it out. Admittedly, it's been a long time since I've played either of those games, so I'll definitely have to go back, give them a playthrough, and see if actually Fallout 4 is the better option. But yeah, as for Fallout 4, I just think it's mainly the main story that lets it down. The mystery surrounding the Institute is fantastic, and they probably should have lent more into that. The faction choices are excellent, but the emotional payoff surrounding Sean just never completely landed with me. I also wish the Brothers of Steel had received more of a meaningful quest line, because they're easily my favourite faction, mainly due to them being the main quest line in Fallout 3, but even so, I would have seen more done with them. But even so, look, this is still an outstanding RPG, an incredible open world game, and one of Bethesda's best exploration experiences made. And today, with the Ultimate Edition of the game, like I say, dropping around £10, it's ridiculously good value. If you fancy jumping back into a Fallout game, or have just finished watching the Fallout TV series, despite being out for quite a while now, and have just been tempted to jump back into the wasteland, well, take this as your sign, because Fallout 4 is still absolutely worth revisiting. It's one of the easiest, best RPGs to lose hundreds of hours in. Even a decade later, the Commonwealth remains one of the best worlds Bethesda has ever built. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll catch you in the next one.